The CAMMUS LC100 pedals are priced at $259, making them squarely aimed at the budget-orientated sim racer looking for value. We get a full pedal set here, so 3 pedals and a sturdy steel base to bolt them to. The brake pedal uses a load cell sensor, and the throttle and clutch use non-contact Hall effect sensors. So from the outset, features we would expect from a modern pedal set, so that's a good start. Up next, I'm going to give you a detailed tour around the pedals and their features, and then onto the track for my testing and evaluation. Okay, let's get started. The pedals share the same aluminium frame design, but featuring different springs sets them apart from each other for their specific function. The throttle has a larger pedal face than the other two. Also note, the pedal faces are not adjustable. The additional drilled holes are for appearance only and don't line up to the mounting holes on the pedal arm. The spring resistance is adjustable by turning the collar on the threaded rod to increase or reduce the preload on the spring. There's also a lock nut above the collar to prevent it from loosening. The 2 plastic sleeves sliding along the rod act as the pedal stop. You can remove one of them if you prefer a longer pedal motion. Bearings are used on the pivots that join the pedal arms to the frame. The tolerances appear tight. I'm not detecting any lateral play. The controller board for the pedals is housed in this box, sitting within the frame of the throttle pedal. To the rear of the pedal are 2 sockets. The USB Type-C is for operating the pedal standalone, connected to a PC, and the RJ socket is for CAMMUS wheelbase owners for a direct connection to the wheelbase. The clutch pedal is unremarkable and pretty much looks like the throttle. There's no clutch mechanism effect here, but we do get a stronger spring though. The brake pedal is more interesting with some notable features. Firstly, the load cell sensor is rated for 100 kilograms. The spring and the elastomer are the apparatus that pushes weight into the load cell. The manual describes the possible brake adjustments you can make, however, it is poorly written in places and can be confusing. The manual suggests adjusting the preload spring tension and the number of travel limit washers on the rod as options, and if I'm correct in my interpretation, exchanging the elastomer piece with one with a different hardness. No extra elastomer pieces are provided, so you'll need to source an alternative elsewhere if you plan to do that. This is a large damper, on the end is a dial. The setting will have a significant impact on the resistance of the pedal. We'll cover this more later in the video. The pedal plate is cut from 4mm sheet steel. It feels heavy and I really don't expect to see any flex coming from this. The arrangement of slotted cutouts are for placing the pedals onto the plate, so you can seat the pedals close or further back, and some room for the lateral position too. And the holes near the edge of the plate are for bolting it down to your sim rig. Those 2 odd looking loops are simply for routing the pedal cables. I know what you're thinking, as I have that same opinion. The cables look really awful and there's no way to make them tidier than this, so unfortunately the sleek look of the LC100 pedals are somewhat spoiled by the poor consideration to cable management, the main offender being the brake cable being too long and sticking out. And also I found that metal loop isn't useful as the cables are too stiff in that small area. So yeah, that was a waste of time to try and mess around with that. Hopefully these pedals can redeem themselves on track. But before we get to that, here's a quick look at the CAMMUS software. On the left, you can visually inspect the pedal input is functioning correctly and set the minimum and maximum threshold for each individual pedal, a quick procedure that you will need to perform before using the pedals in-game. On the right, you can make curve adjustments. The default is linear, being a straight line. You have the option of picking from the preset selection shown on screen or dragging the points on the grid to produce your own curve. Although it's possible to apply curve to any pedal, it's only the brake where you may find this possibly useful. Personally, I stick to linear on all of the pedals. When you make an alteration to the curve, you're affecting the way the input is being registered. For instance, if you want the pedal to have increased braking at the beginning of the pedal motion, you set this curve option. Then observe the gauge and see how that changes the input as you apply pressure into the pedal. I'm only lightly pressing the pedal here and it shoots up rapidly before tailing off. Then I need to push heavy weights into the pedal the rest of the way. And if we try this one, inverting the curve of the last one, the pedal is not very sensitive at the beginning, but catches up later. And finally, this S shape, which I'm not entirely convinced is useful at all and seems a bit confusing to me. And there you have it, the companion software for these pedals. I have many things to share with you regarding the LC100 pedals, and a lot of this is not going to be good news. First, I want to talk about the pedal base. You can see a bit of flex in the middle. In respect to that, the base is floating, bridged across two pieces of profile. It's bolted to without any other support. So that one's on me and not the plate. It is stiff and I can't feel the flex. So ignore that, it's fine, and I could tackle any flex if I add a lateral support underneath. Now, since these are not going to end up being my main pedal set, I'm not fussed for this review, but I am happy with the sturdiness of the pedal plate, even under the stress of heel and toe shifting where you'll be hammering on those pedals. But there are a couple of elements I don't like. Firstly, the surface of the plate has a rough texture and it's taking rubber off the soles of my shoes. Just after a short session, a pool of rubber has accumulated. Secondly, the notch cut out of the plate at the front, which I assume is for aesthetics, reduces the area for your feet to rest on. You may find your heel propped up against the edge and not fully on top of the plate. This is really not good, and especially a problem for anybody with large feet. I also have to criticise the included set of mounting bolts. They are too long, so I ended up having to use my own. Not a big deal for me to sort out, but a basic schoolboy error that we really should not be seeing here. Let's move things along onto the pedals. The throttle first. The spring tension is good, decently firm, which I like and want with any throttle pedal. Out of the box, I did find the pedal throw too short for me, so I went about adjusting this and discovered an unusual relationship between the pedal tension and distance of pedal travel. I mentioned before how you go about changing the preload tension on the spring and also the purpose of the pedal stop sleeves. Now the issue is when you change the tension by tightening or loosening the collar, this also affects how much space the pedal stop pieces have on the rod, and this also essentially sets the pedal travel. So you may have to make a compromise here. If you increase the preload spring tension, you're also reducing the pedal travel. And of course, if we look at it the other way around, a lighter pedal by loosening the collar increases the pedal movement. On the rod, there are two sleeves, so you can try removing one and then adjusting the collar, but I found that doesn't really work out. Running just one sleeve and the pedal motion is far too long, and then you really need to cinch down the collar, whereby the pedal is overly stiff. What's needed here is those sleeves to be in shorter sections, so you have more room for manoeuvre on setting this adjustment. An option would be to simply cut these in half, but instead of that, I'm using one of the sleeves along with a stack of M6 washers. Just like the pedal plate mounting bolts being too long, this was not a big effort to sort out either. But I have to say, the lack of simple attention to detail from CAMMUS is disappointing, and this problem also carries over to the clutch pedal that I'll cover next. But first, let me finish my notes with the throttle first. Now, after making those adjustments along with those washers, the pedal is actually pretty nice. I've managed to lock in the pedal travel and firmness just right for me, and it's all good now. Now let's talk about the clutch. Mechanically, we have another rod and spring setup. Notably, the spring is more substantial than the throttle spring. My first observation being that this clutch pedal is very firm, in fact unrealistically stiff compared to a real clutch pedal. And secondly, the pedal has a loud creak. But before I attempt to fix that, let's see if we can address the pedal stiffness. I want to show you a mistake you don't want to make. The instinct is to loosen the collar to lighten the preload on the spring, and job's a good un. Well, that's wrong. Remember, the position of the collar along the rod changes the travel of the pedal. Loosen it too much and this happens. The pedal overextends and rips a chunk out of the pedal arm. Let's take a closer look. So to avoid this, we're stuck with an extremely stiff clutch with a lot of preload on the spring. I could run some small washers along the rod like I did with the throttle pedal, and another solution is to find a replacement spring. In this instance, I did neither. My more pressing issue is the horrendous creak. My first thought was to lubricate any points of friction. That made no difference. And that led me to think it's coming from the spring, and if I loosen it, will that change the noise? I'm not able to unscrew it by hand due to the force of the spring load. After loosening the collar all the way back, the creak is gone, so indeed that unpleasant noise is coming from the spring. But now we're back with the same problem we had before with an overextended pedal. So what I'm going to do is unscrew the back piece, get to the rod and add some washers. After all that effort, it looks like we're all good now. With those changes made, the clutch pedal is fine. There's no clutch effect mechanism, it's a basic spring, but the tension and travel of the pedal gets the job done. So it's at where it needs to be at least, and I'm really glad it's no longer creaking like newlyweds on their first night on an old bed. So problem solved, now we can examine the brake pedal. It's worth a quick recap on the component parts. Running along the top is a damper with an adjustable dial, and below is the spring and elastomer that pushes weight into the load cell. I'm sure you've already worked this out, but just to be sure, the damper, as you can see, is separate from the spring and elastomer, and its purpose is to provide resistance for you to push against, but it has no influence on the weights being picked up by the load cell, as it's not connected to the load cell. The spring and elastomer are the only components that bear weight into the load cell sensor. The spring compresses easily under a moderate amount of pressure. That means only a light load is picked up by the load cell. The majority of the braking input is registered after the spring compresses when you're pushing against the elastomer. The 30mm elastomer piece is quite solid. I would estimate around 90 A shore. Also, don't forget you can adjust the stroke of the spring using the collar. I initially found the spring portion of the movement too long, so I did tighten it a few turns. The resistance of the damper is adjusted by turning this dial. It's labelled 1 through to 8. The higher the number, the greater the resistance. Observe the brake pedal when the damper is set at 1. Let's crank it all the way up to 8 and the difference is huge. I'm really stamping down on the pedal and it's extremely sluggish, and that's not good. The resistance of the damper is slowing down my effort to get on the brakes. So you won't be running the damper at full whack, and I've turned it down for my testing too. So we've established setting the damper to a high setting is suboptimal, and that's immediately obvious when you try it. But I also discovered something quite interesting running the lower damper settings too. I ran much of my early testing with the damper at 2. From my perspective, the brake pedal under my foot felt pretty good to me. However, I constantly struggled to hit the right measure of braking and found myself either under braking and then followed by over braking to compensate. It may not be obvious from the footage, but you should be able to catch a glimpse of the tyre smoke in the mirrors when I'm approaching some corners. This problem occurred over my first 2 full days of testing. And I really couldn't understand why I was experiencing this problem. The brake felt fine and the software was set up correctly and also rechecked, but I simply wasn't able to get on with this brake. Normally, within a few laps with a new pedal set, I'm usually pretty competent, but not with these CAMMUS pedals. And I was thinking at this point, just after a couple of days, this is a terrible brake and I'm gonna rip it to shreds in the review. What I haven't done at this point is try out all the other damper settings, so I decided to look at this as my final option and incrementally turn up the damper dial and retest. And if by magic, just turning the dial notch up by 1 to 3, it changed everything for me. It's not even as if the brake pedal felt that much different than before, but it was an instant transformation. I was hitting my braking points like a champ and no longer having the issues I stated previously. It's totally bizarre that just this minor tweak has turned it around for me, but for whatever reason, this exact measure of damper resistance helps me work the brake, and the brake is actually good. If the damper is set at 3 and it's working out, let's try the damper at 4. And instantly the brake was terrible again, and I'm finding my braking input is slower, and although I'm not locking the wheels, I am definitely less competitive. I'm not going to show you this entire race footage, but I didn't manage to overtake any cars, simply because I wasn't braking effectively into the corners. The takeaway from all this, and the good news, is once you've dialed in these pedals correctly, they are very decent. But what occurs to me, and what is something that's really critical, is they need to be zeroed in precisely, otherwise they are a mess. Every one of these pedals needs your attention before they're fit for purpose. Out of the box, bloody horrible. Once you've invested the time tweaking everything, they'll do a good job, and I'm happy with how they perform and how they feel. I also want to add that the LC100 pedals are very sturdy, no side-to-side pedal wobble, everything is solid in this regard, and I have no doubt they are built to last, so they deserve some points for that. Unfortunately, I'm still left with the pedal plate that wants to eat my shoes, and the cutout that has no useful purpose. I'm conflicted here and apprehensive to recommend the LC100 pedals. I don't consider these beginner friendly after what I went through, and it seems a fine margin between getting them set up well or being a mess. There is good performance to be had here, but you do need to be prepared to work on them and find the sweet spot. I don't hate these pedals now that I have them figured out, but the LC100 pedals really wanted to hate me when they first arrived. The price of the pedal set is attractive, so that still may catch your eye, regardless of the shortcomings. Now, would I recommend this pedal set, considering the price point and the performance? If you're shopping for reasonably priced high-performance pedals, I would recommend you watch my reviews for the Simpson Pros and Simjack Pro pedals. You'll find links below to those reviews, and honestly I would pick either of those pedal sets over these CAMMUS LC100 pedals. And that's my verdict. And we're going to end it on that, guys. I hope you found this review useful, and if you did, do hit the like to support my channel. I would appreciate it. Thanks very much for watching, and until next time, happy simming and bye bye.